Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and I feel pretty good about today. I have something that might make a bit of a splash. In fact, it's probably going to get included in, I'm going to be coming up with some sort of bundle thing so that people can start using sets of Airwindows plugins without getting too overwhelmed. And this is a fundamental part of that idea. This is a plugin called monitoring. Monitoring is what gives you, well, all of this. It gives you all of the mix checks tools that you might need for any given situation, whether that's over speakers, whether you're only on headphones. Oh yes, I have headphone uncanning stuff now, and that's being introduced in this plugin. But it is also incorporating all the mix check stuff that I've had coming up to this point. So to dive right in, we got Out 24, and that is Not Just Another Dither 24-bit, the version in Studio 10. So this is your highest quality 24-bit output. It's also what is behind many of the other ones, like subs and whatever. They're being not just another dither to 224-bit by default for monitoring purposes. So you should be able to listen to any kind of mix check technology through that and have it sound pretty amazing. We've also got 16, and of course that is the CD export. What you're going to want to do is export using that if you're making CDs, and then just export directly to 16-bit or burn it to CD just like this. Then we've got what I did fairly recently, Peaks. And remember, Peaks is not for sounding good all by itself. What it's going to do is show you what elements don't sound right, and it's also a really exaggerated version of a technology that'll help you hear peak energy better over headphones and things. So with Peaks, this is your mix check for if stuff is poking out in a normal style mix. Like you can see on the bit of waveform that you can see here, that this is not overly splatted and loudinated. So it's showing a fairly respectable balance there. Then we've got Slew Only. If you turn this on, you can hear only the brightest stuff because it's only the slew of the output. It doesn't have any mid-range or bass. And it should still sound kind of like music or something using this. I mean, you're going to hear all the cymbals and things, but if anything is wildly out of place here, then you might want to fix it. It should also be about the same level. Same with subs. That is so low that there's like nothing else, and it sounds about 2 houses away. And that'll show you what's going on in your deep lows. Like, can you still hear a bass guitar or various elements that you might be using? Is the kick just overpowering everything? Is the kick not showing up? And this should be showing some kind of reasonable thing, and it should also be relatively in balance. It's fairly likely that it's going to peak out at maximum, but you probably don't want it so smashed that it's just distorting wildly. Like, we'll go back to, say, the PeaksOnly, and that's peaking out hot, but it's not obliterating things. Likewise, that is peaking out hot, but not obliterating things. That's kind of what you want. It's designed to work for a good mix so that the levels are going to be about right for you. Then we have a mono mix check. The correlation meter here shows you that you have entirely mono, because that's a very simple thing to do. It is not just another dither, so it's a good quality mono. Then, side, the correlation meter says literally the opposite. And this is only your side channel. Then we have some interesting things. The next 3 are band passes made out of the Airwindows biquad filter. And these are what I was doing to compare with Interstage, to see whether I could make a bandpass that was unusually wide and unusually low Q, but still sounded exceptional. And what I found was the biquad sounded too vanilla. Interstage sounds much more interesting, although I do get people wanting to slam it just for tone, and if you want to put a distortion on something, then put a distortion on something rather than trying to make Interstage be that. But the biquads are even more vanilla than that, and they don't really have much of a sound, so it turned out that I was able to use them for monitoring. Observe what's going on or tell you what, I'll skip over to another one. Observe what's going on in the deep lows and the extreme highs when I turn this on. If I turn on vinyl monitor, it's not doing any vinyl sound kind of stuff. It's not even centering the bass. All it's doing is providing a bandpass that's going to cut out what vinyl mastering usually cuts out. So you can see it's stepping on the highs more than it was. The highs will go a lot louder, but if you were going to vinyl, you wouldn't really get to do that, so it's restricted. And you're also curing the deep bass in this sort of dub techno-y kind of thing. Get stepped on quite seriously. We'll go back to the other ones, more generic, and same deal. We've got lows and a wideness to it, and then if you turn on the vinyl monitoring, all it's doing is restricting the extreme frequency ranges in such a way that it's giving you an idea of what you'd be able to get away with. But wait, there's more. Here's something called Aurat. Same thing. This is the Airwindows biquad filter being used as a bandpass, and it's being sculpted in such a way that it sort of mimics the frequency range of your Aventones and Auratones, and also the little paper cone speakers that I've been looking for. My friend Karloff on one of the forums made those for a while and stopped making them, and if I could find them, I would. I'm also maybe trying to find some original, like 70s or 80s actual Auratones, which same deal. But this is not a model of those, and this is not like a convolution response, because I don't think that's useful. What it is it's restricting the band using the highest quality biquad filter I could make, which ends up sounding very vanilla. So if you take it out, you have a normal sound. You turn it back on, and you're pretty much hearing only the mid-ranges that you'd hear through one of those little mix check speakers. And that doesn't do everything. For instance, if you are using speakers with a crossover, you turn that on, you're not going to get the cohesiveness of a single monitor, a single driver speaker. But it'll let you force the rough frequency response of it, and it'll do it in a way that is unusually clean compared to running some kind of impulse response and having that be really messy. Again, this is the kind of thing where you don't necessarily want to do an elaborate speaker model and an elaborate room model and stuff. You just want to get the reference factor in place. And so we've got that. Oh, but wait, we can go even farther. Check this out. If you're listening to stuff just over your phone, you're probably going to get something like that. Not very musical, and it's also not the same thing as Slew Only. You'll notice that you get a lot more ultra highs this way. And with the phone style one, it's just all mid-rangey and tiny sounding. But you can quickly reference that using monitoring. Now here's where things start to get amusing. We've got cans A and cans B. Let me tell you what that's about, because it's a little subtle by design. Cans A is the kind of crossfeed style processing people have been begging me to do. And it comes in two forms. Both of them do the same thing. They're using similar technology to Peaks. In fact, they're using the same all passes that you get in Peaks, where it smoothes stuff out. But Peaks completely replaces the sound with a series of all passes. And what the cans options do is they take the fastest of those all passes, which is still slow enough to resemble time differences between one ear and the other, and it applies a quieter version of that all pass to the opposite ear. Then it takes that and goes to the longest version of the all pass in Peaks and applies that back to the original ear again. So what we've got is two things. One of them is the literal stereo crossfeed, and that's going to take your extreme stereo sounds and give you that sort of spatiality. And then there is a faint additional sort of all-passy style echo stretch out thing, and that's becoming more of a sort of ambience because headphone listening doesn't give you that. So what happens is Cans A has a quiet version of the the opposite all pass, and then the ambient thing is at a slightly stronger level because it's been already cut down so much. And Cans B has a sort of louder version of both, that the crossfeed is quite strong, and then the adjacent one is not also stronger, but it's feeding off of a similar thing. And all of the gain controls that are being done by these are done using my shifted bits, and that plugin that I can't say on YouTube because they think I'm saying a naughty word, bit shift gain. So unlike other people's crossfeed headphone processors, this one has Airwindows all passes and the Airwindows gain shifting thing going on to make it the purest and cleanest thing. Also, it's all running in Console 5. So it sounds a little bit like this. I'll turn it on. And Cans A sounds like that. Turn it off again. And then Cans B off is like this. And then turning it on. Now, one thing you'll notice in monitoring through something, especially Cans B might be your friend for really late mix sessions where you're doing a whole bunch of mixing over headphones and you start to become fatigued. Because Cans A is very close to the raw signal. It's meant to not mess with the sound much at all. And it's going to retain a certain amount of the raw original sound. Its effect is very, very subtle. And all it does is sort of like ease a little of the fatigue of the raw headphonesness. Cans B is bringing in more of that all-pass flavor, and it's going to have a similar effect to PeaksOnly, where it's going to give you a picture of what the overall sound would sound like over, say, big speakers and things. So what you get when you turn it on is suddenly over headphones you're able to hear the size of the bass. Things that are loud over speakers are going to sound loud again over Cans B because it's exaggerating that to the point where it becomes pretty plainly obvious, I think. I'll switch over to a spacey clip for this one because that has the super heavy lows to it. You got this. Then if we turn on Cans B, you're going to hear that the kick drum becomes sort of obviously huger. And that shows you what to do. If you like that, that's good. If you don't like that, that's telling you that you can turn it down. We'll turn it back off. And now it's much less obvious. But we'll turn it back on. And now that you can hear what that sounds like, we'll show you a little bit of cans A and these ping pong guitars. Just get localized a tiny bit, but it's not changing the voicing of the mix all that much. It's just making it a little easier to deal with, but it's not altering things that significantly. You turn it off, and then that's purely raw. A little bit of the crossfeed, and there you go. And again, we put on cans B, and you get much more of a sense of what it would sound like over big old loudspeakers. And while we're having fun with that, what I can do is show you a couple of things. For instance, we've got a drum track, and that really sounds like this. That was just a little bit of peaks there. And if we throw things like subs on, you can tell it doesn't have very loud lows. So if you were mixing this and you wanted to compare it with, say, Slew Only, you can pretty well plainly tell that the highs are louder than the lows on this guy. And the peak energy, the low of the kick does actually hit really hard if you're putting it over vinyl. It'd be sitting in a range kind of like this, or over the mix check speakers. It's going to come off kind of like that. And then lastly, if we were to listen to these drums, this simple like 2-mic drum recording over cans B, it's going to make a change as far as sounding a little bit more like coming over a stage. You get a little more of a sense of what that would sound like over loudspeakers. You take it off, turn it back. You can hear a certain boxiness to it. And that's not really what you would do with monitoring, but it's one way of messing with it. And then we can also throw on a sort of heavy rock thing and hear what cans B, for instance, sounds like through that. And this latter part of this is going to make more sense for headphone users, but obviously there are lots of those. So, I might even become one at some point. I'll be doing, well, I'm a headphone user right now. What am I talking about? Anyways, this is a heavy rock song. We got wide guitars. And if we turn on cans B, we got a sort of a sides to it. You turn it off again. And with that, you can tell that a lot of the sounds have a peak energy and sonority, even though they're kind of compressed, that there's an intensity that makes them hard to balance and hard to mix. If you throw on something like peaks, you can hear all the bits where it squishes. But then if you turn on cans B, you're not squishing nearly as hard, and you'll still hear what the projection would sound like over speakers, even though you're listening in headphones, because those all passes are doing that for you. They're rotating and spreading things around enough so that the essentially inaudible peak energy gets translated into what would actually be there.
Screen like horror from Japan, and they sang Discord, welcome home. We're all so glad you're here.
Also hear that kick drum. That kick drum is quite deep and sustaining. It's really kind of thumping, but if I turn off the cans B monitoring, it won't be nearly as obvious on headphones, like this.
Discord, welcome home.
find the kick drum again?
We're here to do your bidding.
But now you can hear
Don't
it.
you dare be sad. Let's get this party started, 'cause there's chaos to be had.
There you have it. Monitoring is going to be included with any packages of plugins I put together just to let people start using stuff without digging through huge piles of the things, which I think is going to be a useful addition to stuff. I will have to curate them. I'll have to figure out what works together and probably to achieve certain purposes. But everything is going to get monitoring because it's a fundamental last thing in the chain. To the point where if you're doing your output, what you'll do is you'll do all your mix checking monitoring using this stuff. You can check as if it was over the, horror tone speakers. You can listen over headphones and get a sense of what that's about. You can check the highs and the lows. You can check the overall peak energy, not on mastered stuff, please. And then when you're done, export using Not Just Another Dither, the version that's in Studio 10, out 24 or out 16. And 16 will give you the CD level of dithering, and then the 24 will give you sort of just general purpose. And it's probably also what you're using if you're going to DACs, like monitoring. If your headphones are going to be doing something like that, your output or driving your speakers are going to be doing something like that most likely. If you do have a fancy DAC that can be fed 32-bit floating point, then all you're getting is, remember, the NJAD, Not Just Another Dither, is based on the naturalized algorithm, and all it's doing is making decisions based on Benford Realness calculations. So basically, there is nothing that's going to hurt in 24-bit. In fact, it will do a certain amount of sonic help with that. It is a dithering algorithm that generally sounds better than not doing one. And it's the kind of thing where you could even go to, frankly, if you're going to something like 32-bit and that's your converters, we're pretty far away from you being able to hear that no matter how loud you're making. It's a subliminal thing. And the point I'm making is that the NJAD algorithm, being this Benford Realness calculation, is a subliminal thing that helps the sense of naturalness. People are liking it, so it's built into monitoring. That's just an Airwindows thing. That's just what you got. So there you have it. If you can use all of this or any of this, feel free to download monitoring and start using it for this purpose. It'll give you the same thing that was in Studio 10 as far as the ultimate high fidelity dithering. And it'll give you PeaksOnly, Slew Only, and SubsOnly, and mono and side channel only reference checking. And it'll give you 3 different little band passes that are very decent sounding, but they don't have much of a sound of their own. That's why they don't really work for an Interstage analog model type thing, is because they're too bland. They don't have much of a sound of their own. But they are nevertheless still the fancy biquad running inside console Airwindows thing. And that'll let you sort of enclose your mix in a band-limited sense that resembles various kinds of mix checking. I hope you enjoy this kind of stuff. I think that it will come in useful, and I expect to be including this in other products, like collections of plugins for various purposes. The reason I've been able to put all of these things out, because pretty much everything except for cans and the biquad bandpass thing have already come out as individual VST plugins for Mac, Windows, and Linux. And all of that is because I have been able to operate on Patreon. Now, I'm sort of going after a goal for Patreon, in that if I can get the Patreon up to $1,500, regardless of what they pay me at the end of the month. Like, people can cheat on this one and be like, yay, we're going to be over $1,500. Oh, wait, he's about to charge us. Run away, run away. That's just human nature. That's just humans being humans. I can't hold that against anybody. But anytime we're over $1,500, I'll do a Evergreens podcast where, for patrons only, I'll be analyzing classic vinyl records and playing them for you in a way that you can really hear them properly. And I'll be explaining how that stuff was done and how you can make mixes like that with that kind of mojo and energy. And it has a lot to do with the kind of stuff that I've been talking about with stuff like Cans B or Peaks, where you're designing a mix around intense sonorous peak energy that's not getting eradicated. It's not getting like a multiband compressed out or anything like that. Instead, it's standing out there. It's what the guts of your mix is based out of, so learn how to work with it. I am providing the tools for that. If you would buy this plugin for $50 a pop, and that is with lifetime support, you get to use it on all your computers, and you get the source code, then please jump on my Patreon and throw an additional $50 my way, as if you were buying it like legit and for reals. Because the funny thing about this, I've seen people talking about subscriptions, and there's a large controversy going on as everybody switches to subscriptions, kind of like I switched to Patreon, and people fight over who is going to be the final one left standing when you do the subscriptions. The difference between what I do and the difference between that is, if you're using Airwindows plugins and you bail off the Patreon, you still get to use it. So all I can do is ask. All I can do is say, if I've done something that is that amazing that it's become fundamental to what you do, and you would have thrown me $50 like a year, then please do jump on the Patreon and support me for that. It helps me do more and bigger things. And I've got some doozies in the works, believe me. But Patreon does actually work for me. The way that it functions is I'm able to do Airwindows full time. And the reason I'm having to come up with like sets of plugins that will be including monitoring as the final thing in the Mixbus is because Patreon has let me work full time and put out so many plugins that now I need to start winnowing them down for people and putting out little collections that are more approachable, and where I'm making a more extended video and explaining a lot about how they all work. That's basically how that rolls. I'm very happy with how it's working, and I'm especially happy that people have given me the opportunity of doing this. Consider this as sort of little, well, maybe not so little, gift of appreciation for being allowed to be in this line of work. Because there's a lot of people who are fighting fiendishly to stay in this line of work, and they really would like to turn the screws on people as hard as they can just so they can get some more money out of them. And I want to throw tools in people's arsenals, whether they can stand like 5 more monthly bills or not. And this is the way that I do that. So if you can jump on the Patreon, I totally appreciate it. That is how I'm still here doing this. If you can't, I want you to use this anyway. Seriously. Because I have been in those shoes. I mean, for the very beginning of Patreon and stuff like that, I was pretty much hurting for food, and it was a very big question as to whether I was going to be able to pay my bills. I've got that stuff covered now, but it's not that long ago, and I know exactly what that's like. So consider me in your camp, and I will support your work, and I'm sure that enough people will support me that I can keep doing more and more of this and start doing some of the more outlandish things that I'd also like to get rolling. With that, thank you for supporting me through all of this, and I hope that you like the way that I'm trying to support you through all of this, and I will talk to you later.